Hello, everyone. Welcome. We will get started in just a moment. I'll give people a chance to join the room, but you're here today for How Top Studios Kill Bad Bets. My name is Adrian. I'm the marketing lead at PickFu, and I'm here with Heather De Bernardi, who is the director of product growth at Scopely. She gave an awesome session for us at GDC this year, in case you happened to be there and saw her, or maybe you missed it. But this is going to be kind of a similar workshop where she walks through how Scopely and the other studios that she's worked at in the past test and pre-qualify their game concepts, art styles, character designs, app store creative, all that good stuff before they invest serious dev time or UA spend or budget in it. So that's our topic today. We'll get things going. I see a handful of people are here. Feel free to say hi and ask questions in the chat or the Q&A anytime. We will be doing a Q&A at the end, or we might pause and answer questions throughout. But either way, by the end of the session, we'll get to your questions. So feel free to just throw it in there. We will be sending out the recording and these slides to you tonight. So keep an eye out for that. And in case you have to leave early, you'll get that full recording later. And then we're also going to share some free credit, a code for that to run your own tests so that you can follow some of the things that Heather is going to show today. So I will kick things off to Heather to introduce herself and we'll get going.
Hi, everybody. I wanted to first start off with who I am. My role at Scopely sits somewhere in the intersection between product, marketing, and UA, which means I'm always in the room for a lot of decisions where a wrong call could have a really large monetary consequence. In that environment, you don't really get to guess. Every feature, every character, every store asset, every creative direction either improves your conversion or it's costing you. That discipline is what I want to share today. What I'm walking you through isn't a theory, it's what I actually do to reduce risk before production starts, before I spend any money, before we commit sprint time to something that hasn't been validated. So let me first show you the tool that makes most of this possible. But first, I want to walk through a scenario. It looks kind of crazy, but this is a common Tuesday at most studios. You have a $500,000 budget. You can choose one direction, no A/B tests, no safety nets, no let's see how it performs, and go from there. You're about to make a call that will shape every creative you run and essentially drive your whole campaign. Every store asset you build, every UA dollar you spend at launch. And you can only pick one choice. Now, take a second and really think about it. Which direction would you bet on? So this is the same game, but four completely different ways to position it. So let's read through these four options. We have A, which is about skill-based combat and competition. We have B, which centers around collection and roster depth. We have C, which is frictionless progression, idle, low-pressure play. And then we have D, which covers narrative and world building. These aren't made up. These are real archetypes that show up in a lot of UA creative decisions every single day. And the thing is, any one of these could technically be right, but any one of these could also bomb. Without data, it's really a roll of the dice. So let's absorb that. All right. Again, we have to allocate 500K to one. What will it be? So we have our four options here. And let's lock in our choice and see where we landed. I would just say, like, based on my experience, I would like, oh, people want low pressure, idle progression. That might be where I go with my decision. So let's see where it stacked up. These results are from a PickFu survey. They're targeting actual mobile RPG players. And we can see here D, the narrative-driven piece, is actually what performed the best. Players want to be immersed, not just optimized. We see that option B, in terms of building a roster and unlocking characters, did pretty well. And this is usually something that's pretty important in games I've developed, but that's speaking off of experience. not the data that we're looking at now. There was no definitive vote in our group across all four choices when we first did the exercise, and that was kind of the point. Like when we're sitting in a room and you have a lot of different seasoned individuals together, you're going to hear something similar to what I was saying. I was like, well, based on some of the other games I worked on, maybe just something a little friction, where you're not really feeling a lot of pressure might be the best. And then you might have a designer go, oh, well, depth and roster is really important. But here, there's a clear external signal. I'm not saying like all the other directions are wrong. There's always ways to make things work, but why go through the extra effort of forcing a concept when you could build off of a strong starting point that's grounded in player preference, the people you're actually going after? And kind of reiterating what I was saying before, ultimately, decisions without data are guesses. And this slide is kind of the thesis of everything I'm going to be talking about and sharing today. Overall, gaming industry, a lot of smart people in it, but we still get it wrong constantly because we're not always operating off of a signal. Often it's rooted in a gut feeling or experience. Every creative review where someone says, I don't know, I just feel like X creative is stronger. Or if you're having a roadmap debate that becomes political battle, there's a soft launch where you find out if your bet paid off 6 months and $1 million later. Testing won't fully eliminate risk. Nothing truly can until something's out in the market, but it tilts the odds in our favor before we're actually putting money against it and real sprint time on any one idea or concept. So let's move into Pick Fu. Before we jump into actually how to set these things up, PickFu is an on-demand consumer research platform with built-in panels where you can filter specifically for gaming behaviors, which I'll get into shortly, like a player's favorite gaming genre, what platform they primarily use, even down to spend levels and play frequency, which is why I really like it. And the key difference here is speed. A lot of what I've heard in a lot of the companies I've been at is just, oh, this is going to take too long. Research is going to take weeks, months. Here, we can have directional signal in less than an hour. And with the amount of decisions that we constantly have to make, I can't wait weeks either, or sometimes even days to get a signal and start moving. So I'm not using it for deep qualitative research or to craft down really deep behavioral funnels. I'm using it to answer very specific questions fast before I commit a team, and before we start any experimentation loops or paid spend. So, which feature makes a mobile gamer more likely to download and play? Now I have direction on what's a lead for an App Store creative. Is our UI intuitive? I can do a click test to see where players are actually naturally moving and what they're thinking, to refine the experience before we put it live. I use it ultimately when I need clarity to move to larger decisions. It's one tool in a larger stack, but for fast directional decisions, it's my most used tool. And here's the framing I like to use with my teams. We're not using Pick Food to magically predict winners and move at warp speed in full confidence. We're using it to eliminate obvious losers early. We want to refine weak concepts and graduate stronger ones to other ways of validation. By the time something hits production or paid spend, it's already been filtered through player signal multiple times. The ROI isn't just the lift we're seeing, it's a lot of the waste reduction that's happening in doing this. How much did you not spend on a creative direction players would never respond to? How many sprints you didn't burn through on a feature that ranked last in every segment that you looked at? That's the real shift here from let's validate to let's pre-qualify. You want to pre-qualify your ideas before they become expensive. All right. So here's how today is structured. We'll run 2 live tests. one for genre and feature validation, and then we'll move into App Store screenshots. After this, we'll talk about how we're connecting insights across the tests, because again, one data point isn't very useful, but a pattern that will most certainly surface as you're running multiple tests is where you'll get the real leverage. And one more point before we start getting into it is why fast validation matters. Again, I've already said it. Usually research is slow. You need a team. Sometimes you need budget, depending on how it works within the company you're at, and a few months, and sometimes it ingests the results. And by then, opportunities are passing you. For faster studies, such as an internal playtest, they're often small, biased towards the loudest voices in the room. And also keep in mind, those types of tests, you're also filtering through people who already believe in the product. This is usually where opinions start becoming strategy because they know the game, or they're really passionate about a very specific mechanic, or they loved a competitor creative. None of that is bad because experience matters. But when you're making big bets or you're committing to a sprint, you want signal that just isn't just internal consensus. And when you combine fast deadlines with fuzzy signals, you're ultimately having to make a lot of guesses. The cost of testing in quick cycles early is significantly smaller than finding out during soft launch or during a pivotal campaign where the cost is now enormous. And that brings me to the other thing I see go wrong. And it's not about whether teams are testing, it's about how they're using the data. And this is the mistake I see most often. Teams run the test, they look at the results, they put it in a deck, and then nothing changes. The decision that they were already leaning towards still happens. And that's not testing, that's just validation theater. You ran the test to feel better about a decision you've already made. The discipline is asking three key questions that we have here. What decision does this inform? What result would actually make us change course? And who needs to act on this? If you can't answer those, don't run the test. You're not ready to use the results. When you can answer them, though, testing becomes decision velocity. You stop having the same debates in every meeting. And on my teams, we use PickFu across every vertical: product, UA, ASO, creative, store optimization. Anytime we're about to commit resources to a direction, there's a candidate for fast validation testing. Character designs before the art team builds them out, store screenshots before a Google Play experiment, feature copy before it gets written into a product spec, creative concepts before production. The earlier in the process you're testing, the cheaper the insights. And this is $100 pick food test that kills a bad direction. And so I consider it one of the highest ROI moves you can make. All right, now let's actually get into it. For the first demo, I find this one to be very foundational. You can run this test at any stage of your game's life cycle and get something useful out of it. So here's what we're pressure testing. You're working on a live RPG title. You have more feature ideas in your backlog than you have sprint capacity, and you're not sure what to prioritize at this point. You might have some community signal or some early data. That's your first filter. But once you've understood those layers and you have clear goals, the question then becomes what will actually move the needle with real RPG players in the market. Now, what do we think is the coolest? This is where most teams are flying blind. I've seen and sat in on so many sprints like this. A feature makes it or even gets cut from the roadmap because the room liked it or they disliked it. Competitive envy, which I kind of went into earlier, is also a factor. Competitor X just shipped a really cool feature. We need to follow suit. Cool. But does your specific audience and in your specific genre actually want that? Or are you just reacting to someone else's roadmap? We're going to replace this with an actual signal live. Okay, so let's talk through test setup, but let me actually pull up the PickFu app. So I've selected create a new poll. I'll be queuing up two questions, which you can see are already here. One is an open-ended one. And this gives you a lot of good qualitative texture that a multiple choice or a ranking might not give you. And then single select, which is the second that I've chosen here. This one will give you something where you have a clear winner. And in this one, you don't want to be asking yes or no questions. You want to get a good idea of where they're stacking in relationship to each other and which one is surfacing the most. So in this one, in our made up game, Realm of Valor, we want to understand what would you even expect something like this to be called. So it's called Realm of Valor. What genre does it live in to somebody? Why is this important? Well, when you're going into the App Store and you're browsing and you're looking for things, you'll see Realm of Valor. But what if there's some kind of identity mismatch? And you could just find out by running a quick little poll here. So this is what this is meant to do. And this is what I was talking about earlier when we were saying, hey, what are the three kind of guiding principles here? What would you do with the data? And in this case, I would want to understand, is the name putting people off? Do people identify it as an RPG game? So this is what this one is meant to do. We don't need to add any other options given it's open-ended. However, if you wanted to add additional context, you could by selecting this. In this case, I don't want to lead, therefore I will not. Moving into the single select. So these are around the features that would most entice people to play. So I've listed out this game's features. And again, when we're talking about what are we going to do with it after? We're going to take this. We could turn this into App Store creative. We could turn this into creative positioning. We could also front load these modes or ideas in the beginning, knowing that it's attracting this audience. And single select is definitely my workhorse for quick validation. Ranked is powerful too. You can see here all of the different options. But for this one, I just want a quick read on the top asset, and then we can kind of go from there. And then when we're going down, we're keeping the sample size small. What I like to do is understand trend and trajectory. So you can always add more later. I get that question a lot, is like, how much is a good starting population? It really depends on how many questions we're running. I usually start at 50 and then see what the results look like. Is there enough separation in the choices? Am I getting enough qualitative texture on the open-ended? You can always add it after a poll has completed. But for this, we'll just do 15. And then this is my favorite, and what kind of attracted me to pick Fu at first is the advanced audience. Basic, just think Gen Pop. Own, you can actually use your own audience. Maybe you want to understand what people are already doing in your game. In this case, we want to attract new people. And so I've gone advanced. Speaking of workforces, mobile gamers, yes, this means everyone who is taking the poll is a mobile gamer. You can search a lot of different audience traits here. Maybe you want to gate by people who spend a lot of money or a specific game genre. Maybe because we know we want RPG people, we go with RPG. I like to keep these as filters for when we're looking at the actual results so that I can get a good understanding of just how is it doing with the general gaming population, and then slice the data to look at the different genres. You can also look at different game modes, consoles played, hours spent, a lot of things to choose from here. We're going to keep it simple for this. You can also go through hobbies if you know there's some kind of synergy or health. I mean, there is a lot to choose from, 120 plus, but because I work in gaming, most of my time is spent around here and in entertainment. When I was talking about the results, This is where it's referred to as charts. And this is where I usually select a lot of these. So we want favorite mobile gaming genre. I want to understand based on hours spent and frequency potentially. We already know they're mobile gamers, so adding this extra level of detail, it's all yes. And maybe I want to filter the results by app store spending habits, which I commonly do. So this gives you all different types of dimensions when you're actually going and looking at the results. And then you just pay with one click and it goes live. So really, really simple. You can see here, it took me, and I was explaining it probably like what, a couple of minutes. And this is why I love it. I have my couple of questions here. I have everything kind of locked and loaded. The nice thing about features specifically is it doesn't require assets and it can still kind of give you an idea of how you might want to develop creatively. Okay. Now, this is everything I just went through, so let's move on while we're waiting for results to load. And let's talk about where PickFood fits in the broader testing stack, because I did touch on that a little bit. I like to think of it as a first filter. I use it to get directional signal, to cut obviously weak directions, and then sharpen the ones that are worth pursuing. So it usually isn't a one and done thing where we look at these results and we go, all right, this is it, the end. We may use a lot of the comments to then improve the ones that we like or think there may be an opportunity there. After PickFu and we're moving with stronger directions, I move into deeper testing. So this could be A/B testing in live. This could be Google Play experiments. This could be click tests on paid, and then setting it live to see if there's any change compared to your baseline. The sequence matters. PickFu at the beginning means you're investing your deeper testing resources into ideas that have already passed through the filters that we've set. You're not burning time running Google Play experiments when you could have learned this in the 20 minutes it took to set up and wait for the results and look through the results. So when they do come back, the results, and they're close, here's exactly what you're looking at. So when we're going through everything, the first thing I want to look for, and we kind of touched this a little bit, is what do players think our game is? A gap between that and your intent isn't necessarily a failure, but it is useful information. It simply means our title is sending a different signal than what you plan. That's worth knowing before you spend money on it. Then the features we went through, top performers are your prioritization anchors. Bottom performers are the features you might want to spend a sprint or so building or looking into other opportunities based on the comments you're seeing to see if there's any type of conversion. Maybe it's something that isn't modern, or maybe it's not well described. So there's a lot of things you can pull out of the qualitative comments. They will tell you with their choice why they chose what they chose. That language is gold, not only because most of it is actionable, but they're describing as a potential player the game, the descriptions. That's gold for UA copy, maybe even some of the feature descriptions as they go through, because you're speaking their language now. Real words from real players, and this is unprompted. And that's better than any brief. And then we want to check the insight report for patterns across the responses. Themes that show up across multiple respondents are signals worth acting on. Okay, so now let's look at the actual results. So as you can see here, we have two tabs, one for each question. First, around Realm of Valor. So if you don't want to go reading through everything, there is a top level overview of what players are thinking and also some key callouts across the theme. So strong RPG association, that's a win. Fantasy and medieval themes, is that what our game's about? Then maybe that's another win. And then potential for strategy elements. So there were some comments, and you can see this as you're scrolling down, around suggestions for hinting at these if it exists. Um, but yeah, like you can go through each and every one. You can mouse over, you can see they're a woman, 35 to 44. It's going to be yes for every single one because they're a mobile gamer, but you can get an idea about their identity, their age range, and ultimately maybe you want to take certain groups if you know you're trying to attract women, as an example. Maybe you want to weight them more. If you know that your audience skews older or younger, maybe you're looking at those to either open up a new audience or to expand your already existing one. So in this case, we have our overview. It's pretty straightforward. We know that it's doing its job. Now moving into the features. This is one of those moments where I'm looking at it, I'm going, I think customization could absolutely be it. But then now we're asking people who are mobile gamers, the people we actually want to go after, not someone who has been developing the game for X number of years and also has a lot of experience in other games. And in this one, lore-based quest lines. And so we look at that and we go, why? There's certainly customization appeal. It's not at the bottom rung here. But again, we can look at the insights here and we can understand why these were chosen. And a lot of it was just highlighting the importance around storytelling and immersion. Hero customization is the follow-up winner here. In this case, I may want to add more respondents to understand how this changes. Obviously, it's a very small sample size, but it could be that we actually want to go in and dig further and understand and look at snapshots of each respondent group and how it changes as we expand the audience out here. But same kind of thing, you can go in and you can see for the choices, and this was a single select, you can look at who selected, how many responses there were, and for the ones you can see have 0, those would be the ones where, hey, maybe we don't lead with that. Maybe it's something where we don't want to feature it in a lot of the creatives or in the app store, but it matters once someone's stickier. So we move it further down the funnel in the game or we introduce it later. If it was something we felt strongly about, maybe we ask some follow-up questions like, does this really only matter once you've actually established yourself in the game or you've invested yourself? These are all things I would want to ask and better understand ultimately. And if, again, you don't want to go through, you can look at this. And because we're talking about directional, this is something where you can get a quick read and you can start thinking about what you want to do. As you start adding more filters and more respondents, you have more to look at in the demographics. You can start seeing some greater splits here. And again, we don't have a lot of filtering here, but we could add it. And this is where you may actually want to dig a little bit deeper. You can actually filter by key areas like I was talking about before. You can go, okay, I really only want this younger 2 groups. I'm mostly concerned with women. And then anyone who mentions this, I kind of want to get their vibe for what they're saying about that very specific keyword. Okay. So let's get back to it here. All right. Going back one. So what do you actually do with this? Here's how you take it off the screen and into real decisions. So we know lore-based quest lines go to the top of our sprint backlog potentially, not because PitFu is the only input, but because we now have some external validation to back up the prioritization conversation. Try walking into your next roadmap meeting without any data and see how far a good feeling gets you. And it could be, like we've discussed multiple times now, where you do your first test to kind of get a gut check, and then maybe you put it out in a click test. Or maybe you look at what already exists in the game and take a look at your internal analytics, like your Looker or whatever it is that you use for data visualization and analyses, and actually see if there's some kind of proxy. And then for guild gifting at 0 votes, that would either get deprioritized or reframed or looked at with a different lens, like we talked about. Do we want to do follow-up testing? Do we want to test within our existing player base? That's generally something based off of experience that only people who are already immersed in the game would care about. It's worth asking, is the feature wrong or is the way you're describing it wrong? Both are useful things to know before you're committing here. The language from the insight cards, strong RPG association, fantasy and medieval themes. You want to share that directly with your UA and creative teams. You don't want to paraphrase it. You don't want to sanitize it. Like I said before, real words from real players unprompted. And as you're adding more and more population to it, you'll get more and more of that as creative fuel for briefing. And then let's move into workshop 2 and talk about the App Store a little bit. So workshop 1 was about product direction, and lightly you can take a lot of that into App Store, but App Store is the first thing a player sees after clicking your ad, and most teams spend enormous budgets driving traffic to the pages that are never validated with real players. I've seen quite often actually that the App Store is something where people jump straight into live testing or Google Play, but this is your fastest and most controllable conversion surface, and players are deciding in seconds. So running a test for 2 weeks on experiments or on Apple's version of that, you're losing time, you're losing money. And the frustrating thing is you can have an incredible game, great UA creative, and a compelling title, and still lose the install, maybe just because your screenshot order is wrong or you're not surfacing the right features, and players would actually like it. A mismatch at this stage will kill intent. And because the App Store page affects every channel, organic, paid, influencer, getting it right has outsized impact. But the good news, the App Store is one of the cheapest things to test and one of the highest leverage things to optimize. So same flow as before. Let's set this up. So in this case, I'm going ranked. This is the key difference from the feature test. We're not asking players to pick a favorite. We're asking them to critically look through each of these screenshots for my game and sort them based on the likelihood to download. So I've uploaded these 4 screenshots. In your case, if you were to set this up, these are candidates for either what's going live or you're uploading what is already live. If your game is already live, I would highly suggest as a first test to upload everything that you have there and see, like, is that first screenshot, is that second screenshot actually in the right order? And then if it's something that you're developing on, maybe it's more around these are kind of the things we think are going to do well, and then developing some of these to, again, get some directional insight. The setup is the same as before. We want mobile gamers, and we can, again, filter through. In this case, I wanted a very specific type of player. So, and I wanted to understand how it changes over time. So it's like, this is clearly a puzzle game. Let's see what puzzle players think about. Are there any other adjacent type genres or maybe even categories that we want to look at here? And so this gives us more ammo and more ways to look at it when we actually run this poll. And then you can add, I believe, up to 8 options here as well to have people sorting. Yep. So I've only have 4 in this case. And one thing that I didn't show you in the last one is that you can actually preview it and everything's just drag and drop. So you can upload image, video, audio. In this case, this is an App Store screenshot or what would be a candidate for it. So that is what we'll do. And then you can see here, low cost, under $100, very easy to test, and knowing that your UA budget is probably significantly higher than $50 in most cases, especially at AAA or even just a regular mobile game company, then this is money well spent here. And so with all of these, similar to the single choice, people will stack rank, but they will also explain what it is, or their logic for why they've sorted it in the way that they have. So while that one bakes, here's a few other things that we typically test in App Store optimization or ASO. In practice, we test almost every attribute. So icons, screenshots, messaging, app previews. And most importantly, we want to look at different variants based off of geo, language. Icons are often underestimated. A good icon can communicate your genre, your tone, and in quality signal and a thumbnail. This is something they don't just see when they land from an ad, but they could also experience while they're exploring and shopping around for a new game to play. We've seen meaningful conversion differences from an icon change alone. The reason that we're going with something like screenshot order, though, is that there's a lot of conversion leverage there. And it's something that most times already exists, and because there is a volume of them, whereas a lot of the times icons require painting, concept artists, and multiple art that in most cases currently doesn't exist. Now, if you're doing background swaps or color changes, they won't move the needle as much because they're not materially different. But with screenshot order, again, low-hanging fruit, easy effort, and usually people are looking at the first one or two anyway to decide, and they're not even expanding the scroll. So this is also a really important exercise. If your most compelling feature isn't leading, or if you're opening with something that confuses a genre, you're losing people who might have enjoyed the game. And then, like I just mentioned, there's language and geo variants because what works in the US will most likely fall flat in APAC or LATAM, as an example. Based on where someone lives, there are entirely different cultural expectations, visual preferences, color associations, and character appeal. It varies significantly by market, and you can test that on PickFu as well. You can choose places that you know you want to target and test within that very specific market. All right. So let's look at the actual results from this poll. So we can see here C1 with 60%, the puzzle gameplay screenshot, clear board, legible tiles, obvious objective. Players knew exactly what they were getting. Now, let's look at what came in last here, D. And this is something where the level complete screen at 13%, this insight card tells you why. Avoid level complete screens. It's pretty straightforward. Again, this is something you could very easily scan for and understand why. A result screen doesn't show you what you're doing in the game. It shows that you're finished with something. Players want to see the game mechanics, not a trophy. Your three directives are kind of sitting here buried within your cards. What people want to see gameplay at a glance. They want the puzzles to look intriguing, so depth, not necessarily simplicity. And then prioritize in progress gameplay moments. This is something that we could absolutely do moving forward as a next iteration. So this could really be something where we're looking at it and we're going, okay, C is doing reasonably well, and B could be something that is tied to that. So what I would want to do is figure out how to level them up, retest, even look at the losers here. And I say that in quotes because it's something where there's still opportunity for reframing, especially when you have good insight into what isn't landing and you can see where people put their option first. So it's like D, they like this, they like the animals. So that's something that even though people might not necessarily want to see a level complete screen, maybe that's something that we can actually work into B or C to level it up that much more. And that's ultimately the loop. Get direction, sharpen the direction, graduate to live, start again with new and updated assets. And here you can see how everything was voted. This was very much just moving through and reallocating based off of what got knocked out. And then you can see splits by identity, household income, and then you remember we chose favorite mobile gaming genres. Now we can see based off of what they like to play the most, how the options change. So we can look puzzle and match. You can see it's far more split. But if you remember, these two options, B and C, were largely around mechanics. So it kind of goes into a lot of the things we see in the summary and in what we'll consider negative feedback, but ultimately helpful feedback around let's see some in progress gameplay. What's the flow actually look like? So because we know, as an example, that this may be something where we haven't fully saturated the puzzle market yet, we're early anyway, we want to go after this. But maybe we're later on and we started adding things like strategy or maybe casino elements or things where we're evolving a little bit more in terms of depth. Maybe we have mini games in there, and so you can start looking at some of these other ones marked as favorites and see where the direction may go. So when you're switching your UA up to be more targeted towards those types of players, you can then create a custom landing page to show them very specifically the ones that they liked. Okay. So we have a winning order. Let's say this is something where you're putting it out and these already existed. Now you have a sequence worth testing. So you take the sequence based off of where they ranked and then you put it into live. So you can test up to 5 variants on Google Play Console and the app product page optimization is the iOS counterpart. And then you can start measuring the difference in conversion based off of your pick food results. So we use pick food to pre-qualify the direction, and then we use a live ABC test confirming the lift at scale. A good bonus move is to run dedicated follow-up tests like we just discussed on just your first screenshot and different variations of it. We want to lead with the match board. Maybe we add those animals in. Maybe we add effects. Maybe we add arrows to indicate how it is that you play. Oh, Adrian?
Yeah, I think it's my turn.
Yep.
Um, I am going to give Heather a short break and talk a little bit about just one quick, if you are using AI tools, what you might find interesting. I'm going to keep it on this not full screen for just a second, but just to quickly go through, PickFu also does, so Heather just showed building those tests manually in the PickFu survey builder, which is great and super easy to do also, but we do have a couple of other options. So if you're using tools like Claude or ChatGPT or Cursor already, or even Notion, basically any tool that allows you to use MCP connectors, PickFu does have an MCP. I will share a link in the chat in a minute, but if you go to pickfu.com/docs, there's instructions for how to set it up. It's super simple. And then you can use Claude to like generate a research plan, a testing plan, and then to automatically run those tests without leaving Claude. It can connect to PickFu. You can feed it images that you want to test. You can feed it copy or whatever you want to test. And then it will build that PickFu test for you and launch it. And then you can check in and be like, hey, what's the results so far? And it will pull and retrieve those results for you and analyze and help you break it down. And then you can even push it out to other tools that your team is using, like Slack or Notion, to share with your team a little bit easier. So that's one option. I'm not going to actually show that today, but feel free to play with it. Super easy and it doesn't like cost anything either. I will show, we also have a web agent. Think of it like your research assistant in the PickFu app on your browser. So I'm going to scroll back up. I pre-ran some of these because I wasn't sure how long they would take to do live, but it was pretty quick actually. So I ran this other example yesterday for which visual style would you prefer for a mobile strategy game. So you can see there's three completely different visual formats here. And I just did a quick 30-person mobile gamer test. And when you open this PickFu AI sidebar, if it's an empty chat, it will have some prompts in here, like example prompts you can click. So one of them that I clicked was generate a winning option breakdown, and then it kind of did this whole prompt. So it basically gave me a breakdown of which option won and what the feedback was on each of them, what people liked about each or disliked about each one. So it gives you this pretty thorough breakdown here, and you can tell it to make it simpler or just give you the highlights if you don't want to read all of this. Gives you the recommendation. And then I told it my image, let's say it was option C, what changes would you recommend making to it based on the feedback? And it gave me what's working about the image, like what people who voted for option C actually liked about it, and what to protect, and then what to change based on what people liked about the other ones. Obviously, you'd want to test, if you're going for a certain art style to begin with, you don't want to, this is kind of an extreme example, but the same feedback or the same direction applies. You take what people might have liked about the competing images and you can use it to, tweak options. So, what's cool is that we do have image gen tools built into the agent and the MCP. So if you want, obviously you're going to want to pass it to whoever is actually doing your designs ultimately and doing your artwork. But if you want to just generate some quick concepts to test before you invest like your team's time in actually designing them, then this is a cool way to do that. So it gave me this cute little generated image here. I'll go back. And so just like a rough direction, and then I asked it, great, give me a research plan for testing that new image against our original and against the winner of this test. And so it gave me this research plan. It told me how much the survey is going to cost, what format we want to use, and all of that. And then I can click cancel or confirm. Gave me a little breakdown here. So I'm going to type change sample size to 30 and target players who like strategy games because I think we have that as an option in our favorite genre list for targeting. So going to wait and see there. But it's pretty cool. So basically, you can open this on almost any page in the web app and you can ask it questions about any of your poll results, what your team is doing in here, if you've invited your team. It can build surveys for you and you can just adjust it from here and launch it from here. So it's just an easier, if you don't feel like messing with the whole survey builder or if you're confused by all the options, it will give you recommendations and best practices. It has our help docs built in, so it can kind of guide you through the process if you're new to this kind of thing, which is really helpful. So it's updating it. We don't have to stick around for it to finish. But oh, I think it might be done. Hopefully. Yeah, you can also add files. So if you already have images to test, you can drag it in here. And then just to call out, if any of you are going to try and play around with this today, you can invite your team for free. We have unlimited, you get unlimited team members, so you can just invite them from this tab right below the AI. Okay, so it updated it, 30 respondents, mobile gamers who like strategy games. So then you can just click confirm and it should launch. I won't stick around, but this is basically a quick overview of what you can do with the PickFu agent in the app and similar things with the MCP and Claude. I'll jump back. Okay, confirm poll is launching now. I'm going to share the link too when I have a chance, and I'll show you. You can see, you can watch the results come in because it's kind of fun. All right, let me present now, and I'll kick it back to Heather, but I'll keep sharing. So Heather, just let me know when you want me to
Sure.
switch slides, and we'll wrap this up.
Yeah, let's do one more over. Let's talk about connecting tests and what it looks like in practice. So the feature that ranked highest in our first workshop, that's our lead creative hook in UA. That's your hero screenshot in the App Store. That's the first feature players interact with on onboarding, the genre language that players use in their open-ended responses. That's your store description copy. That's your ad headline. That's how you write your product spec. When you run these tests consistently, you start building a map or a library, the message becomes coherent because it's grounded in the same source of truth. And that's ultimately what top studios do. It's not a single clever test, it's a culture of fast validation that runs through every team and every decision. Okay, next slide, please. There are some limits because overusing any single tool is just as dangerous as not using it. PickFu is excellent for directional signal on visual and framing decisions. Again, it's fast, relatively cheap, and it gets you out of that opinion loop for a lot of decisions. It is not a replacement for a deep usability study, or if you're trying to understand why players are churning at a specific tutorial moment. You need session recordings, potentially heat maps, behavioral analysis. PickFu won't give you all of that, although it does have many of those aspects, but it is ultimately not a replacement for looking at your own analytics and then doing longer term longitudinal studies or looking at your live environment data. Use it for what it's good at, which is pre-qualifying directions fast, cutting any obvious losers early, and giving your team some clarity around the decisions that you're making, and ultimately kind of hopefully ending a lot of those subjective debates. Right tool, right moment. Before we wrap it up and open up to questions, there's three things that I want you to take away from this. So, one, pre-qualify. Do not just validate. The highest ROI from player research comes before the production, not after. Run tests when changing direction is still cheap. Two, connect your tests. Feature signal should inform your creative. Creative should inform your store page. Your store page should inform your UA targeting. Siloed testing is where the biggest gains are absolutely left on the table. And then lastly, ask the three questions I discussed. What decision does this inform? What result would change our direction? And who needs to act on this? If you can't answer any of those, do not run tests. Okay. Any questions?
Thanks, Heather. Yeah, we've got a couple of questions. One of them's in the Q&A, and it's about sample size and statistical significance, which is a great question. So Eric asks, you need about 362 votes or respondents out of 6,000 people to get a statistically significant sample with a standard 95% confidence level and a 5% margin of error. 10 to 15 votes seems like you might be basing your decisions on far from statistical significance values. Do you usually get more replies?
Yeah, so 15 was just for the sake of like running through the test quickly and getting a poll up, but I kind of touched on it a little bit before. I start smaller, not 15 small, but probably like 50 to understand what the base looks like and to see what the responses are trending like. And then I start applying more and more. I usually end like for something simple, like where we're just trying to do order, maybe we start around 50 to 100. For things that are larger business decisions, I might scale it up depending on how the trends look as I'm adding respondents. But another really important point here is this is directional, at least for me and my team. It's not the only tool I'm using, and I want multiple inputs. So I'm usually looking at community feedback, my own analytics. Sometimes I'll run an additional survey with my own audience. So and then looking at UA data and things that we have access to synergize it all together, not necessarily going, okay, PickFu is telling us direction we want to do this. That's kind of at the end. I really want to validate across multiple platforms, which is why I was suggesting too, like say we run 50 to 100 and we get a good idea of order, then we can validate that in the Google Play experiments or in Google or Apple's optimization storefront and really see. But at least we'll come in a little more with a little more knowledge than we would when we're all sitting around a room guessing, essentially.
Yeah, that was a great answer and a really good question because we get that asked a lot. a lot of our users do run smaller tests, especially when they have a smaller budget. Like a lot of, teams that might not have a huge research budget, they run these small, like 50-person tests just to get some quick feedback on early concepts. And they still do get good feedback and good direction, especially when the votes are clear. And then they can iterate a lot more cheaply and, like you said, validate with a bigger sample size when they are ready to launch or when they're ready to make a bigger choice. So that's the kind of direction we see a lot of our customers going to. Thanks, Heather. Jonah has a question. Let's see, a lot of testing pipelines focus heavily on native mobile app store optimization. When evaluating games deployed via web portals or browser-first builds, how do you adjust your testing formats to measure landing page conversion and core visual readability instead of standard mobile store metrics? Very
Yeah,
good
so
and detailed question.
yeah, I love these, by the way. So when we're talking about different gaming formats, it usually comes with like a difference in template. So I have my own gaming projects that aren't mobile, and I actually have a Steam game that I'm working on as an example. So what I like to do is give the context to the viewer. So it could be something where if it's a browser-based game, you would want to screen cap and or recreate that browser experience to put people there without having to tell them. So same when I'm doing App Store creative tests and I'm pre-qualifying it on PickFu, I'm essentially rebuilding what the App Store experience might look like in that moment that I'm asking about. And same would go for console or anything like that. It's really putting them in that context visually. So my formats for App Store testing versus console testing versus web browser is really getting them visually to see the format so you're not having to add that extra context. But that being said, you can add that extra context as part of your question. So if you're asking questions around your browser-based game, you can pull it in context under the question. This is a browser-based game. You can find it here. It's in early development. However, whatever additional pieces that you can't clearly communicate visually, you can absolutely do. And if you're talking about other methods outside of just PickFu, you can do a lot of ABC testing with a ton of different tools around click and take them to different landing pages to see which one's the most effective in sending traffic equally to them to see what the difference in conversion, because you usually have like one CTA there. Over
Cool.
oh, sorry.
That was fine. Thanks, Heather. Yeah, definitely. And I was just going to call out too, because we just had one of our team go to China Joy, and people found this interesting, is that there are different testing options and formats in here other than what Heather showed today. So when you're testing things like landing pages and browser pages for your games, we do have screen recording options. So this actually you can give your respondents a link to your page and have them actually record their screen as they interact with it, which is cool just for like some qualitative directional feedback. It's usually a smaller sample size is available for those, but you can actually see them interacting with your page and you can see where they get confused or where the message doesn't make sense or where they just like don't like your game or whatever. So that's one option. And then in general, you can also just share URLs here and they can click into it. Or you can, like Heather was saying, put, an image of the area that you want to focus on increasing conversions for and share it that way, and get open-ended feedback or run click tests, see where people are clicking, things like that too. So just to call out that. But thank you. That was a great question. Qualitative theater is a great term. All right. Does anyone else have questions for Heather? We are right up against time. We did great in timing this, by the way. Uh, I will just run through a couple quick things before we hop off. Feel free to add any last minute questions in. If you think of something later, feel free to email us info@pickfood.com and we can get you connected with Heather if it's something for her. We will be sending out an email, like I said, with the recording later today. We're also going to send out this code for $50 free credit. So you just sign up for your free account and build a test and then use that code at checkout and it will give you those credits. So that's enough for one small test, just to get started and play around with it for your own games if you would like to. So thank you for joining today. Thank you so much, Heather, for running through this. And yeah, it was awesome.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.